Jen brought my gavel, so I use it.
Yeah.
Call this meeting of Jamestown City Council to order for our work session for July 12th. The clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sheldon?
Here.
Brackman?
Here.
Karuba?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Nelson? Eklund?
Here.
Graham Reinhardt?
Here.
Russell?
Here.
And President Dose.
Here. Thank you. This time, we have anybody here from the public that would like to speak. If you'd like to say something to the council with 5 minutes, state your name and address.
Actually, I do. I have something to say. Melissa Paternetti, Faulkner Street, Jamestown, New York. The one thing I'd like to bring to the council is about the smoking outside businesses. While I lived in Austin, there was a big, huge ordeal with smoking within 25 feet of a door of a business. And ever since marijuana has been introduced to being legal in New York State, that also falls under that umbrella also. So I kind of wondered if that is something that is in the city of Jamestown, that you aren't allowed to smoke 25 feet from a door, and if so, is that through signs or, I guess I don't.
I don't believe we have, I think it depends on the individual business in terms of how far they're, I know like with schools and different things like that, but I don't think there's anything specific.
Cause,
There's anything in the code about.
cause it is that if there is no smoking within 25 feet of a business, that also means no marijuana smoking within 25 feet of that business. So with it being said, like I went to the plaza on Fairmount Avenue, and they have signs that say no smoking within 25 feet of the business. So I just was wondering, is that something that the city of Jamestown has in place? That was just my question.
And my understanding is it's a part of the public health law,
Okay,
so the county health department enforces that.
okay,
What they're gonna be doing with marijuana smoking, I don't know.
okay.
It's all new to everybody.
Yeah.
But there's no signage to that.
I-
I don't see anything.
No.
I mean,
'Cause
my business, or not my personal business, but where I am employed, you cannot smoke anywhere but in your
That's what I'm
vehicle,
saying,
and there's
mobile.
signs for that,
Yeah.
so.
Cigarette smokes, I mean, I'm worried more about cigarette smokes, because when you go to a restaurant, like my aunt and I were at the restaurant on Foot Avenue where Dino's used to be, Lori's Kitchen Cafe or something, and we were sitting outside, and these two people came out after their lunch, and they lit up a cigarette, which respectfully, you would think that you would wait, but, we don't. And as a former smoker, I think that it's very important, especially with, a lot of the health concerns nowadays with cigarettes. So that's the only thing. I just wanted to ask that.
I think President Goltz is right. I think it's up to the individual business, because many of them, I know I serve on their boards, they don't want the staff smoking on premises, and they will have it, and they have, the cigarette, where you can put them out and put them far enough away, and that's their designation. You can't smoke any closer than where they place the receptacles for the cigarette butts when you're done
And I
smoking.
know we had an issue a few years ago with different places when they started to put the
Right.
ban,
Right,
like the library and like at the Lutheran campus,
right.
that the workers were going outside, going across
On
the street,
residents.
on
Right.
residents.
They were-
Property.
Yes,
We had some issues with that. I know, we had the same problem up here with the library, because they became smoke-free, the whole
Right.
premises, and then they're going across the street either to the park, or they were going to the church lot and throwing cigarette butts, so. Again, it's kind of it's an enforcement issue too, it's
Yeah.
tough to.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a hard thing, you can't, is it, if someone's smoking in a non-smoking area, is that a fine, is that a ticket? I mean, I don't know, I would think, cause it's, technically, is it a law? So I just wondered, cause I never see any signs besides like at the park or at the library, but it was just one thing I had the morning to ask.
Well, if you participate in the Hands-on Jamestown, which is again this Saturday, I'll plug it again, this Saturday from 8 to noon, because I
I
have
love
picked
to.
up many a cigarette butt, and that is probably the majority of the litter that we are seeing, picking up our cigarette butts that are not disposed of where they should
If
be.
I could pick up a cigarette butt right now, I would give you $1,000,000.
No, but I'm putting it out there for the community because it is,
Absolutely.
it's a nuisance, it creates a mess, and when they get wet, it's even worse. And if people would dispose of them properly, we wouldn't have a lot of this necessitating the cleanup. So, you know, I know there are many volunteers, but we could always use more, and this is part and parcel of being part of the community, is to get out here and help clean it up. So I think it's between 12th and 18th Street. I
Yep.
think is the
Meeting
direction
on
that
the
we're going
corner
between
of
Washington.
and 14th.
Oh, that wasn't last weekend?
No, it's this.
Oh,
coming-
okay, I was
this-
there, I was there.
It's this Saturday from 8 to noon, and, we could use more help in trying to take care of it, so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing anybody else from the public. We'll move on to our committee reports and finance. Councilwoman Eckman.
We have quite a few resolutions, so I apologize for reading fast, but I'm going to for everyone. Resolution authorizing the mayor and police chief to participate in the GIVE, which is the gun-involved violence elimination, for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, with funding in the amount of $72,221 provided by the state of New York. Ryan, did you check, or maybe Chief, do you know, how is that in relation to last year?
So I don't know that.
We were just curious.
Yeah, I didn't check before the meeting, so I apologize. I can follow up with that.
Thank you, just curious. Second resolution was authorizing recruit firefighters Kevin Erickson, Jonathan Barlow, Ethan Gibbs, and Michael Willis to attend the New York State Office of Fire Prevention and Control Recruit Firefighter Training Program in Montour Falls, New York, beginning August 14th, 2021, concluding October 28th, 2021, with fees and expenses paid pursuant to Section 77B of the General Municipal Laws of the State of New York. Just for reference, these 4 gentlemen started in March, but this is the first availability for them to go through the academy. Third resolution is authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Building Transportation Analysts Incorporated for the Spring Street Parking Ramp Elevator Modernization Project in the amount of $10,500.00, which also includes a contingency of $1,500.00 for additional on-site meetings based on the proposal dated July 6, 2021, to be paid out of previously approved Smart City bonds subject to the Corporation Council as to form. Questions? Fourth resolution is authorizing the mayor to execute change order number 1 to the Spring Street Parking Ramp Repairs 2021 contract with CPS Construction Group, Butler Center, 2421, Route 19, Suite 300, Cranberry Township, PA, to include adding the following: beam repairs, 14 square feet at $162 per square foot, with a cost of $22.68. Top slab repairs, 110 square feet at $149 per square foot, $16,390, and full depth slab repairs, 885 square feet at $160 per square foot, for $141,600, and deduct the underside of slab repairs, 530 square feet at $178 per square foot, for a deduction of $94,340. Traffic membrane repair, 5,800 square feet at $7.18 per square foot, for a deduction of $41,644. And line striping repair, 5,800 square feet at 37 cents per square foot, for a deduction of $2,146, for a total net increase of $22,128.00, subject to the approval of Corporation Council as to form. The next resolution is authorizing the mayor to sign any documents related to the submission of the 2021 CFA New York Department of State under the Environmental Protection Fund for the Smart Growth Comprehensive Planning Grant Program, and also hereby authorizes the mayor to execute all necessary documents with the New York Department of State should the city of Jamestown be successful in securing funding through the CFA submission process. I'm going to read Resolution 6 next, and then Crystal is going to speak about both of those. Resolution number 6 is authorizing the mayor to sign any documents related to the submission of the 2021 CFA New York Department of State under Title 11 of the Environmental Protection Fund for the local waterfront revitalization program, and also hereby authorizes the mayor to execute all necessary documents with the New York Department of State should the city of Jamestown be successful in securing funding through those CFA submission process. Crystal, the floor is yours.
Thanks. So it is consolidated funding application season. Once again, we did not have a CFA last year because of the pandemic. So we are very happy to have one this year and scrambling to get some applications, some much needed applications in. With the first one, the Smart Growth Comprehensive Planning Grant Program, it's actually the first time that a comprehensive planning grant specifically is available through the CFA process. So we're submitting for that. Our comprehensive plan was last updated in 1998. So it's something that's been on my priority list since I started as the planner back in 2018. So we're excited to be able to submit for that. And then for the local waterfront revitalization program, that CFA application is in collaboration with a number of other organizations, local partners, Gebby Foundation, JRC, CCIDA, put together, actually just completed a Chattacoin River strategic business plan. So out of that, a number of recommendations for improvements and activities and programs to activate the waterfront, specifically in the river basin near Comedy Center Park and actually the whole area, so near BPU. So that grant will cover those activities and programs. Any questions? Great.
Okay. Next, we have a resolution authorizing the Jamestown City Council to accept the Chattacoin River Strategic Business Plan and the full environmental assessment form and negative declaration as satisfactory and complete with respect to its scope, content, and adequacy. Any questions or comments? Resolution number 8 is allowing the Jamestown City Council to support the consolidated funding application submission by the Jamestown Renaissance Corporation in the amount of $182,000 for the completion of Prendergast Landing located at 106 to 108 Fairmount Avenue, Jamestown, New York, 14701. And then finally, the last resolution is allowing the Jamestown City Council to support the consolidated funding application submitted by Northwest Arena in the amount of $1,400,000 for the completion of the zone located at the Northwest Arena at 319 West 3rd Street, Jamestown, New York, 14701. That's it for resolutions. We did have a couple discussions. Brief, the first one is for Ryan for the mid-year financial update.
Thank you, Councilwoman Eklund. So starting off just with the revenues, our BPU pilot revenues are actually running really well compared to budget. We're collected about 50% of our BPU pilot revenues overall. There's some puts and takes between divisions. Parking violations are running ahead of budget. We've received 54% of our budgeted revenue. Parking lots and parking meters continue to be an issue with minimal activity downtown, but we have started to see a turnaround in maybe the last month and a half or so. We also, in the 2021 budget, included $164,000 for EMS billing revenue. We have not collected any of that yet. The fire staff is working with All-Star and is currently training, and Chief Kuhn and I went over and had a meeting today with Dave Thomas, so we are working towards getting that overall process up and running. Due to the increase in our fees for vital statistics, the death certificates and birth certificates, our city clerk's fees are running well ahead of budget. Through June, we are up $21,000, that's 77% to 2020. We've actually collected $49,000 year to date. and that's 69% of our overall budget. Also from a sales tax perspective, we're about halfway through the quarter, and the sales tax is trending up 51% above last year, which is a very large number. If that keeps up for the whole quarter, that would represent an increase of $700,000 year over year. And if you compare that same kind of time period to 2019, it was up 32%. So some really good things happening there from a sales tax perspective. I think one of the big contributors to that could certainly be the price of gas, as the price of gas has gone up significantly over the last couple of months. And I was looking today, I think in Western New York, the price of gas is up 41% as compared to last year. So certainly contributing factor there. From an expenditure perspective, outside of police and fire department salaries, we're really running pretty well over the first 6 months. Nothing very concerning. We did have obviously the large fire a couple weeks ago at over on Crescent Street, and we had 284 hours of overtime related to that fire alone. That extrapolates out to close to $20,000 in cost. We've expended 59% of the fire department overtime budget, so something to keep an eye on going forward. From a health insurance claim perspective, we remain within budget. We've only expended 38% of our 2021 budget, so still in good shape there. And then the last comment I had was on the contingency funds. We have $119,000 left, and that's only 32% of the budget. So we're running a little ahead on how much contingency we've used this year so far.
And I know I mentioned it in the finance, but I also want to mention it again here for the general public that on top of the fire department overtime is the entire demolition cost of that fire, which is probably upwards between $400,000 and $500,000 is the estimate Crystal gave us. So keep that in perspective as for a budget miss as well. The other thing we didn't really talk about, it's going to fall under the mayor, is the American Rescue Plan Recovery Funds Master Plan discussion. The mayor is planning on discussing that in detail. We just briefly went details about it and finances all, and that's it for us.
We'll have him do an interim plan. I forgot I was gonna let Dan go we're gonna go out of order a little bit. I was gonna have you go before that. I got going here. I got going. So we'll let Dan go give a little presentation on the situation with parks and cameras and.
Yeah, as all of you are well aware, we've had some vandalism again over in Dow Park. So we went and got a quote for a new camera to go over into the park. And I'll just pass it around so you have an idea. These are the same cameras we use now in all of our existing parks. So Mark Dean was able to get us a quote on that. They seem to work pretty well for us. And what we're able to do right now is work with
Thank you.
we're working with the Community Foundation to help secure some of the funding for this, but there will also be a reoccurring cost on a monthly fee for maintaining it through our systems. So right now, what we're able to do was to move one camera from a different park, actually from over at Nordstrom Park, and transfer that one over. So I've been in talks with the Community Foundation the last couple days, and we'll be looking at purchasing that and hopefully get it here in the next couple weeks and have it at Dow Park.
I'd like to make a comment on the cameras. Obviously, the cameras are a good idea for the park now. I don't necessarily agree with announcing to everyone that we're gonna be putting cameras whenever we have issues somewhere. That would be equivalent to telling someone that's running a drug house or a drug operation that we're gonna do surveillance on your house. So going forward, if we're having issues in areas, I would like to see people work more closely with the chief of police and maybe put these cameras up and not necessarily telling people that we're putting the cameras up. That defeats the purpose. So now what we're telling the public and everyone is we're gonna have cameras there. And I think sometimes we do these things because we're just trying to appease people. But it would behoove us in the future to maybe not let that out, but go ahead and put them in with the hopes of catching someone in the act of vandalism or theft.
Anyone else have any questions?
I would slightly concur, except maybe it will also be a deterrent if people know there's surveillance there, that maybe they'll be I understand, cause it can go both ways, but it may be a deterrent too, that people know that they're being monitored and watched, that maybe it would prevent them from actually committing the vandalism in the first
It
place.
doesn't take much to put a mask on or a hood
I
over your
understand,
head or
hoodies will
can-
cover a
can
face, I
conceal
get it.
yourself.
I get it, but it
So-
might also, people that are gonna do something quick and think they're gonna get away with it may also feel that they're gonna get caught. That's how the arsonist got caught. They got caught on camera. They probably never thought they would be on camera. Or that they could evade the cameras, who knows, but,
So
so
Dan-
I understand what you're saying, but I think it could possibly serve as a deterrent. I know lots of stores have surveillance. They tell you, you're on surveillance, hoping that it'll keep people from doing things, so. We'll have to wait and see.
This is just the price for the cameras. Do we have any idea on the monthly maintenance fee you mentioned?
No, Mark was gonna get back to me, with that, I don't know if you know.
Yeah, Mark did email me about that, and he mentioned it would be around $1,100 a year. He doesn't have a final number yet, but around $1,100 a year.
Is this for all of it, just the one here, or for?
That's just the one camera right there. We've already got 6 out in place throughout the city, that are just ours, not the traffic cameras or anything like that.
So this would add $1,100. Do we already pay for?
I think the maintenance cost now is the 1,100, so I think it's based on that. The 6,100 there is just the cost of purchasing that unit.
Correct, and assuming $1,100 for all of them, not per camera.
Yes.
All right, that's what I was thinking, Kim, that's what I was.
That's a good question.
Can you tell me a little bit more about, you said there was some damage done at, Chattaquin Park, and the camera wasn't working, is that one? Jackson Taylor.
At Jackson Taylor.
You know, old habits die hard, I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah, we'd like to have a second camera there. These cameras don't have full range, and there's quite a distance away from the restroom area out to the new playground area. So these don't encompass a whole park, right? The ones we have in the other parks, you get a portion, usually the high traffic areas. But we cannot cover everything with the cameras that we have. So we'd be looking at another one. Over the last week, I've been getting all kinds of calls about different deterrents and things to use, and I'll get together with Chief Jackson and talk about some of them. Some of them, maybe it's a nice possibility and something different to have. But like everything else, there's a million things out there to get. So I wanna make sure we get what's gonna work the best for us and then be able to withstand our weather as well.
Dan, one last Parks question. The Lillian Dixon playground build, has that been moved up 2 weeks from the 31st to the 17th?
Yes, it'll be this Saturday.
It'll be this Saturday.
Yep, it'll be this Saturday at 8 o'clock. We're looking at doing that. We actually started construction, broke ground last week and started construction today. We went with Parkitects, did the final layout today. Parks Department guys will be digging the holes and prepping the site. So Saturday morning, we'll have volunteers and our guys come in, finish the final construction, and then go ahead and spread wood chips and open up the playground.
Awesome.
Just a final comment too, I just wanna, now that Dan is here, I wanna thank Dan publicly for, last week, the work that he did on July 4th, to come down and handle the situation, at the park, and also throughout the week, the work with, putting up camera, and also, if you haven't been by there, noticed, he had the Parks Department come down and clean up the landscaping, trim back some of the bushes, he put some mulch in there, it looks really good, and it's a lot more visible. As you're going up the hill on Washington Street, you can see the statues that are there. There just seemed to be more visibility, it looks nicer, it looks cleaner and neater, and, we also mentioned something about possibly more lighting, different lighting there too. Lighting can be a deterrent, but also the fact that the statues are now a lot more visible from the street, so that might be more of a deterrent. People, actually, Washington's a very busy street, and before, I don't think you could really see from all the angles when people got in and behind there. So between lighting and surveillance and landscaping, I think, doing what we can to try to alleviate some problems in that spot. So I want to publicly thank coming out on the 4th of July and the subsequent days to address the situation last week, so thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Good with that one? Okay.
There's nothing else from us.
Okay, then we'll move on to, let's see, who's next on our agenda, we will go to housing.
Thank you. We don't have any resolutions, and I will turn it over to Director of Development, Crystal Surdick, to discuss some really good news. We need some
Really
good
good
news.
news.
Very good news.
Yes. Thank you, Councilwoman Karuba. Yeah, so we received notice from the court that housing court will reopen on July 23rd. It will be very limited, 3 o'clock on Friday afternoons, so probably about an hour worth of court. We can start with 10 cases, our most egregious cases. To start with, they will go back to any of the cases that had not been resolved prior to the pandemic, so we'll have to start with those. Waiting to get that list from the court right now. But we do have our wish list, I guess, of the cases that we would like to get in as soon as possible. So, you know, it won't go quick, and we won't see big, huge leaps and bounds right away, but at least it's something. And we're happy that it's happening at the end of this month.
Thanks. I have some constituents that will be very happy because as they're seeing people, I think, were not aware that housing court was not open. And because of that, they were very concerned about homes in their neighborhoods that were not being, the violations were not being addressed, and they thought nobody was doing anything. They were not aware of how hard everybody in your department was working to actually still go out and do their jobs in spite of the pandemic, to get out there and record all those violations. The problem was there wasn't very much they could do once they had those violations.
Yeah.
And unless it was a serious safety issue, there really wasn't much that could be done. We're talking about the demos because the fires or conditions got so bad that they became a danger to the public and had to be removed. So I know there'll be a lot of people that will be very happy, and a number of people who have called and caught me on the street and asked about what was going on. I have let them know this is very good news, so that I can now let them know that they will be seeing some action being taken. Obviously, it's still very limited, but I think given that we thought it wasn't going to reopen until 2022, this is still very good news to hear. So I really appreciate that. The other good piece of news is that we have a code enforcement officer who is in his 3rd week, who is, I hear, picking up very well on the job, and will be replacing one of our long-term employees who's retiring on the day housing court opens. So it might have been planned that way, perhaps. But it sounds like he's gonna be a great addition to the city, and so we're very appreciative of that. We did have a brief discussion about how we can report. I know sometimes people are fearful of retaliation if they're a tenant, and we did discuss, you know, how they can go about citing some of these things, documentation, but there is a way to anonymously report, and I've gotten calls and I have, or emails, and have filed complaints on behalf of constituents when they saw a problem in the neighborhood after looking at it and doing my own work to check it out. So there'll be some very happy people that way as well, but I know Crystal and her department have been very helpful in letting people know that, and how you can inform them of the complaints. As she said, unless they know about it, there's not a thing that code enforcement can do. They need to know where the violation is, and then they'll address it. So for interior issues, we had a discussion about that as well. The tenant or the owner of the property has to invite the city in. You can't just go in, do a knock, and say, let me in, I hear there's a problem. They have to be willing to invite in. So that was pretty much all the discussion, but it was optimistic that we're gonna see some things happening that will probably help, oh, and I did have another piece of good news, that we beat Batavia out for a resident who moved from Dayton, Ohio to Jamestown, and it was between Batavia and Jamestown. And I was delighted, they're in my ward, 2 doors down, and they're very active and very involved, wanting to do things, and have had a lot of work done on their home. So they've hired local contractors, they have been very impressed, and after 2 months, thought they made the best choice they could have made, and they were glad they moved here and not Batavia, so. I thought I'd add that because they always beat us out in development because of their location in Buffalo and Rochester, but to hear that people have chosen to move here from out of state, done their research, and thought this was the best place to land, and after 2 months and even some hiccups on issues with their home and all the rehabbing that they've done to do some things, still thought they made the best decision they could have made to move here. So I'm really pleased and proud that it's in my ward, the 4th ward. So, we need some good news, and it was good news. So that's all I have.
Rumor has it that Marie gets all the votes because she sends care packages to all new neighbors, so. Council
No, but I
members
did
wanna
help them get a
continue winning.
bat. I helped them get a bat out of their house on the 4th of July. So I have no fear.
I took my new neighbors out to dinner. And they're from New York
Did you
City.
get a bat out
We're
of their
gonna do
house?
something Ward 1 too.
Did you help them when they got locked out of
By the
their
end of the month.
house?
Or you can tell it's an election year.
Meeting, right? Things moving, right? We did go out to dinner. All right, we'll move on to public safety and Councilman Sheldon.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We had 3 resolutions and scheduled block parties and a special event. First resolution is authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with the Hope Chautauqua Coalition, 519 Jamestown, for the purposes of acquiring 10 sharps containers for syringe disposal, when medical waste disposal costs covered by a New York Department of Health grant for a period of 1 year. Medical sharp containers are free to obtain through an application process to be completed by Hope Chautauqua Coalition staff. If you remember, we did have a presentation from them through a Zoom conference in the last work session. We had a follow-up meeting last week with the mayor, chief of police, Chief Coons, and the parks director. So this is a good program to try to help clean up some of these areas, some of the city-owned areas, parks in particular. Any questions on that? Next 2 resolutions were also approved by finance, so I'll just go through briefly. First one is the GIV grant for $72,221 provided by the state of New York. And the next resolution was authorizing the rookie firefighters to go to recruit firefighter training in Montrose Falls. And then we did have 3 block parties. The first is Sampson Street Block Party. July 31st with a rain date of August 7th from 2 to 8 p.m. The second one, this is the big one, Eagle Street Block Party on August 21st with a rain date of August 28th from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. So there's a big party there.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
And the last one is from our fellow council member Tom Nelson, his annual Hunter Street Block Party on August 21st with a rain date of August 22nd. They're only going from 4 p.m. till 9 a.m. They keep it pretty busy. Okay, well, we did have an application for a special event submitted to us on Friday by the Jamestown Area Chamber of Commerce for the annual, didn't happen last year, downtown Jamestown Cruise-In. To be held on August 6th, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. with starts at 3 p.m. This is always a big event, always a lot of neat old cars coming downtown, soup-step cars. We get a lot of people coming downtown, there's a lot of foot traffic, the businesses do well that night. We're happy that the Chamber of Commerce put this on. They are gonna have a band to be announced. They don't have it confirmed at this point. And we did get sign-offs from just about all the businesses in the area. They think this is a great idea. Bring things back to downtown Jamestown. I'm sorry. Any questions from the Chamber of Commerce? Okay.
What date
There-
was that?
It is
August
August
sixth.
sixth.
August thanks.
Mhm.
I didn't.
Friday, August sixth.
Thank you.
And we did have an update from Chief Jackson on the gun-involved crime. There was a story in the paper on Saturday. Chief, would you like to address that again?
Yes, Jamestown is nowhere comparable to Buffalo or Rochester, or any of the bigger cities. Our numbers have increased slightly from last year, but what's important to remember are the numbers include all incidents where a gun may be used. So if I were to call the police and say, this person threatened me that he had a gun, that would be included in our numbers right now. It's gonna take a little bit more work to get more accurate, numbers, but so far they have increased slightly.
Is it from Public Safety?
We'll move on to Public Works. Grant, did you?
Yeah, we had two resolutions that also were on finance. The first one was the consultation on the Spring Street ramp elevator. The second one being the change order to the repairs on that ramp as well. We also discussed the 5th Street Cold Mill and Overlay, Washington Street to Prendergast Avenue. We're just finalizing some things with Lakeshore, who was the low bid, which is nice because they're a local company. We also discussed the intersection at Cole and Foot Avenue. Actually, it was something Jeff and I had discussed a few weeks or a month or so back, and then obviously there was something in the paper about it, and there's been some conversation on social media about that. So the DOT is currently reviewing that to see if there's any efficiencies that can be made there. We also briefly talked about the splash pad that was on the docket at one point, but not sure where that's at, and then obviously the cameras at the parks as well.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Before we get to the mayor's remarks, does anybody else have anything?
Actually, I did have one, call from, or an email concerning, one of them had to do with the fireworks, I guess. That, and I appreciate what the chief has said, that it's very difficult to pinpoint them, even if you call, it's very hard to figure out exactly where they are in the neighborhoods, but I do appreciate the efforts that you took to try to cut down on it, because it's just a never-ending battle, and I know we heard them for probably 3 or 4 days before the 4th of July, and we heard them ongoing after the 4th of July. So, whatever, I think, Councilman Russell had brought up some points about beefing up the nuisance ordinance, about the noise, or finding the debris on property so that you could do something more than just find them when they're actually shooting them off. So that was a concern. Councilman Nelson isn't here, and I know the issue of the deer has been an ongoing thing. There's going to be reports, but I'm getting just as many emails for people that are against this and being done, that someone did email me, and I don't know if everyone else got it, about there is a different method that can be used. She offered to raise funds to do it. It was more of a, I'm not exactly sure, but it's some method of birth control with the deer. That's about $200 per animal, is what she said. But she felt it was a more humane way to deal with it, maybe more safe, I don't know, but that was another issue, and it seems to be, I know other people are getting, that want to shoot, I'm getting as many email for people that are against it.
Ditto.
And the third one was about the car show that's going to be at Bergman with La Contraire. I can't remember the name of the group. But Dunkirk had a very bad experience with noise. And I believe Councilwoman Eklund did bring it up, that it needed to end earlier because they wanted a later hour. But I got an email again from an individual that doesn't live far from the park, because of what happened in Dunkirk, they refused to allow it to happen at Point Ratio. They said no, because they had done it at the fairgrounds and they got so many complaints from the neighbors about the noise. They had music with speakers and it was so loud, someone got married across the street, they couldn't hear things. And a lot of neighbors complained, so much so that they said they refused the permit. So I don't know if that's the case with Bergman, and what they planned, but I think some of us may need to revisit that if that is going to be an issue. And it is in my ward and people are already, nothing's happened yet, but people are already concerned about the noise. And having seen that article that was in the Post-Journal today, and I'm not familiar with the group, but other people who are seem to think that it could be a problem if we're not very careful as to what we allow at that event.
And when is that event?
September, is it 18th? It's
Yeah,
mid-September.
But I know they wanted later hours and we did curtail that,
It'll be
but
dark too.
I know, and the
That's
issue,
why I
and the
actually
issue
brought
was
it up.
getting out of that park as well for traffic safety,
I brought up,
18th.
yeah.
I know a lot of those vehicles have high-end stereo systems, and that's my concern, with that. I guess maybe that we need to, impress upon them that this is a car show and not a stereo contest.
I think it's actually labeled as a stereo content, like no, I'm pretty sure I can't say
Serious?
it. But I mean, maybe there's something where we could go in and say like, okay, you got between noon and 2, you can have, cause I know at Bergman used to, at the old car days, there was a couple guys that used to kinda.
We'd have an individual who plays music and announces, and there's no,
Well, I guess the other,
the antique cars are a lot different than what
Right.
these cars
Yeah,
are playing in
obviously,
there.
I guess the question is why does it have to be there? That's a residential area. Is there another place in the city that would be more?
Unfortunately,
Probably
Antique Park
'cause
is
it's one of the largest
residential as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I
Don't we
don't,
have a noise ordinance then?
we
Yeah,
do,
right.
but
But it's over till 11 o'clock, right?
I'm just thinking that, I don't know if there's
Based on the
a better
level of
place to
noise
have it
level,
that would
not
be
time.
less.
Yes, there is an upper limit level,
yeah.
for decibel usage
Mhm.
under the noise ordinance.
We have a decibel thing.
Well,
Every cell phone should have
Very,
a
very,
decibel
very-
thing.
yes, I've heard that. But I just, as a word of caution, we need to be really, really careful
Do we need
because
to
it can
meet
be.
with them prior to the event?
I think there needs to be
Yeah,
some more,
this is the event.
there needs to be some more dialogue to
Right.
impress upon them that this is not a
There's
stereo
330
contest, this is a car show. And that, we just can't have thumping bass up there with it being a residential area.
Well, the issue will be is if there's a lot of complaints, I can guarantee you that I will probably not be inclined to vote in favor of them getting another permit. If this is what Dunkirk has already experienced, and let's face it, everybody's looking to try to get back to bringing events in and bringing people in and having things go back to what we consider normal. So no one wants to discourage this, but if it gets bad enough and people are angry enough, it's gonna be a problem, and you're not gonna find people willing to host them in an area where you've got homes and people, don't wanna be blasted out of their houses.
Well, maybe we need to revisit the permit before the event and stipulate that it's, the stereos, the loud stereos are not gonna be tolerated. And that if that happens, it's gonna be their last time, and that there will be enforcement done during the event if it exceeds the, unnecessary noise.
By the looks of that picture, there's no way it will not exceed the noise.
No.
It's loaded.
Mhm.
You open the back of the car door and there's,
Yeah,
it's speaker.
Yeah.
That's not gonna work.
Oh, it's one of those.
And regardless of what park you go to, you're gonna be in a
And that's like a park,
residential area.
yeah, there's no,
I don't know where else
there's not a
you can move
great
it.
place to put it, but.
This is a power wheel. It's gonna be a portion of their event.
Well, thank you for your input, but I think we need to,
So is it something we can do
need
sooner
to do
rather than
something.
later before we have?
I like the idea of trying to meet with them, see if we can sit down with the, try to get it before it becomes an issue rather than,
Has the permit been approved?
Yes.
yes.
yes, we did, but
Before
no,
we
I don't
realized-
think, I didn't
I didn't
realize
even
it,
really
I
look.
didn't know that's what it was, I just assumed it was
Well, by
like
the
the
looks
other
of it, to
car
me,
shows.
it's kind of deceiving, because you think of a car show, you think that it's more than a car show. It's,
I live in that ward and I have never heard a problem or had anyone complain about any of the car shows that have been in the park
right.
until I saw that and that wasn't here. So I have concerns. You can, noise carries, I mean, you can hear the fireworks all over when they do in the park. But this is different and to go all day will really.
Based on these pictures and the stereo system, it's going to be an issue, so
And this is just
I
one
say
of the cars, right?
we address it now,
Mhm.
meet with them, like Grant said, and impress upon them that this is a car show, it's not a stereo contest show. And who can, crank their music the loudest, shake and rattle windows in the houses across the street.
Or you could just drive down any street in Jamestown and you never get that.
Yeah, but imagine having 40 cars together.
Well, I saw going down 11th Street, I don't know if they had a permit or anything, but there's probably 50 cars that started from 6th Street all the way down North Main Street. Down 11th Street, they actually stopped traffic on Washington across to the park, and the music was just outrageously loud.
They're having their
I
own
can
little
tell you
parade.
this car
Huh?
club,
They were having their own little parade kind
their
of.
car,
It
this
may
car
have been
club
a
does a
parade.
lot of drive-by birthday things, so it could have been one of
And,
those.
and it possibly was, but there was loud music, there was loud cars, there was ATVs or whatever you call those things, those dirt bikes, they were just, and they had no respect for anybody on that street. It was absolutely just ridiculous how loud that music was from the park halfway up 11th Street, so.
My suggestion would be to maybe
Mhm.
set up a meeting with the organizers of the event and go through the concerns and
Mhm.
at this point, and see, and then we'll see.
No, I appreciate it, I really do, thank you for that.
As for the
bringing it up,
deer
Marie.
thing, Councilman Nelson and I did speak at length about, he wanted to update the council and have a kind of a discussion about it, either this month or next, but he's thinking about having a public forum in some location, either in school or some other park or something, to have a presentation as to what he has been working on and what this would look like and what it isn't and what it is. I think there's a lot of misconceptions on both sides. And so, and people need to be heard. And, again, we're being inundated on both sides from people who want to see us do something and others who don't want to see us do something to that extreme. So my suggestion to him was to try to set something in probably either late next month or early in September sometime to have some sort of community gathering forum so people can come out and listen to either a presentation, some ideas, and then voice their opinions and have a little bit more public input before we make any decisions to do anything. So
I just wanna make it known that you can't just involve the city of Jamestown.
Mm-mm.
These deer do not know boundaries, and the deer do not know city limits, and if Ellicott isn't taking care of the problem, Jamestown's still gonna have the problem, because they're still going to come in.
Mhm.
I saw two big bucks on
Yeah,
Main
well,
Street
deer
today.
crossing,
Right,
Two bucks on Main today, like decent
Really?
size.
they're all over, and I don't deny that fact, but
Does the,
you could kill 20 today, and 20 will come in tomorrow from the town of Ellicott, so it has to be more than just a city of Jamestown approach.
is there a state law or is it county for how many, during hunting season, people, is it state or is it county?
State regulates it.
Okay. Cause I also understand, the number of people who hunt has decreased too, so we're not managing the deer population that way, and they don't have any real natural predator that are coming after them.
Coyotes.
Coyotes behind my house,
Yeah, but I mean, are they
take out the baby
they
deer.
take out the babies, right? So you still have the big ones, but, so there's a couple of things that have all contributed to the situation.
well, I think, like I said, we're being asked by people to take a look at both sides. So I think my suggestion to Tom is, do some further research on it and look at some other approaches and maybe bring in other communities and what are other communities doing and, you know.
He's done that. He's done quite a bit of work.
He has
really.
done a lot of work, but it
Yeah, he
hasn't
has.
been made public, and I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
what we need
that's-
to do,
Mhm.
because, you know, people need to be heard and things need to be looked at before anybody makes a decision, so.
Did Tom ever show you the video that he had of the deer that aggressively tried to attack his dog?
He showed it on the.
Chased the dog back up on the porch. A bold deer.
Well, if she
And
had
it was a little baby deer.
Yeah, but if she had a fawn near her, they will do that.
Yeah.
You know, you're on their territory just as much as.
That was his backyard.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
it's still, I had one follow me walking my little 5-pound dog because she had a fawn hidden in the woods right there. It's just their nature.
Yeah.
She didn't bug me, but she followed me, just to make sure we weren't going near it.
Mhm. Mm.
So we'll look forward to that. Okay, I guess it's your turn.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna head over to the projector here for a minute. Grant, are you afraid of PowerPoint?
I don't know.
About what?
Pictures of the mountains.
So this is about your vacation? Yes, this is a slideshow of the photos of my vacation. It was great. It's coming back up good.
At least you, no fires, right?
That's not true. Yes, we had lots of wildfires, but we were fine. We were able to climb. We saw deer that would come right up to you. We felt like it was just like home. So it was quite a lovely experience. This comes up.
We're glad you made it, we're glad you made it back in one piece,
Yeah,
no,
made
no
it back in one
crutches or.
piece. No crutches, a couple blisters, but those I can all survive. Right?
Survived Death Valley.
No poison
Survived
ivy.
Death Valley. Yes. For those of you that don't know, there's a group of gentlemen that all got together and went hiking. We did a mountain climb. We ended up at the lowest point in the U.S. in Death Valley at the Salt Basin, and then up to the highest point, which is Mount Whitney, the highest point in the lower 48 states. So we did a little bit of some hiking. We did about a 50-mile hike, which was a lot for a fat kid like me. So I do want to go through, take about 10 minutes of your time today to talk through what our team has worked on for quite some time in conjunction with the Finance Committee to really look at how do we utilize the American Rescue Plan Recovery Funds. Many of you know that I was at the New York Conference of Mayors, talked to different mayors all across New York State about what do we do with this funding, this money coming in under the Rescue Plan Act. The city itself is in line to receive a little over $28 million. From those conferences, from those conversations, Jamestown is one of the very few cities in New York that has already received its first half. So we have about $14 million sitting in the bank waiting to be spent. Our first report to the Treasury Department will be due mid-August for anything we've done with it since July 31st, which is just kept it in a bank account, right? However, one of the biggest things that we need to do as part of this plan is A, have a plan for the use of the funding, and B, make sure that we are being accountable and reporting on how that funding is being used. And C, make sure that we engage the public in the use of those funds. So today we're going to talk about categories that our team has come up with that we've all worked together to create. We are not explicitly saying here are the 700 projects we want to fund. That is not how we attacked this problem. What we are doing is creating allocations, or what I like to call buckets of funding. Each bucket of funding from the $28 million is accountable to some type of public entity or board that will have a final say on each of those projects that come before. Okay? So we're just going to walk through that in the next 10 minutes just to show you. The plan itself will be available first thing tomorrow morning on the city's website for the public along with this presentation. For the members of the council and any of the media that want it, we have copies. I believe we've given each council member a copy as well to go through. These are really going to be the highlights of that plan. And we have listening sessions that we are working to schedule that I'll talk about right before the end so that we can get that public input, that public engagement. Okay? Any questions so far? Brief overview, just kind of where we're at. There's $350 billion that was allocated under this plan to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments. Of that funding, the city of Jamestown is called an entitlement unit, which means we receive direct funding from HUD. Because of that, we have a direct allocation of this funding, which means we don't have to go to New York State to ask for our money. It just gets automatically deposited into our bank account. We are receiving $28,079,145, of which around $14 million has already been received back in May of this year. Okay? We'll receive our second payment 1 year from when we received our first. So around May 2022, we'll receive the second half of that funding. That funding, the second half, is contingent upon the fact that we spend it in accordance with the law. Okay? If we don't, then the Treasury Department can say, we're not giving you the other $14 million. So we want to make sure we understand this very carefully. The plan that we're laying out today really focuses on spurring economic development and really creating what we call that shot in the arm for the city. Right? It can't be used to plug a hole in the budget. It can't be used to fill a pension line. It can't be used to pay off debt, but it can be used for various projects, of which frees up funding in our budget line for other things. All right, we'll kind of work through some of that. Of all of this, the funding must be committed by July 1st, 2024, and any other funding must be expended by 2026. If there's any funding left over at that point, it must be returned back to the Treasury Department. And I'll tell you what, if you ever looked at my checkbook, I never give a penny back. All right? So that's the same idea here. So we've created we've created several allocations that we're just going to talk about briefly under this plan. Now remember, we're calling these allocations, buckets, whatever you want to call it. Here are the buckets we're putting the pennies in, and then each project can come under one of these buckets, right? We're talking about economic development. We're talking about lost revenue. We're talking about housing and mental health funding. We're talking about water, sewer, and broadband, and transparency and tracking. Right? We'll go a little bit more into depth. The first one, general overview of what buckets these come out of, what allocations. Overall, $28 million. We're allocating about $10 million to lost revenue. I will briefly explain what that means. It doesn't mean that we've lost $10 million. That's not how this works under the Treasury Department's guidance. We're allocating $10 million to economic development, $5 million to water, sewer, broadband initiatives, $2 million to mental health and housing initiatives, and about $900,000 to transparency and tracking. All right? Broad overview. We'll give you a couple projects within it. The first one is the lost revenue. So the easiest way for me to explain this is, if we lost $100, it does not mean that we get $100 back out of this funding. That is not how the actual guidance has come out from the Treasury. It is based on a formula and an assumed growth rate over the 4 years that we have. We take a baseline rate between 2019 and 2020. We apply a formula to that to calculate the loss each year. Every year at the end of the year, we can immediately take lost revenue and apply that to general services. Whether that's to the roads, to construction projects, to parks, any lost revenue category can immediately be applied. So tomorrow, the council can make a budget adjustment, take approximately $1 to $2 million that we have already accrued for 2020 and apply that to projects tomorrow. Okay? Each year we can continue to compound that, and bring additional funding. Now, we do want to let folks know that we are intending, even though we've made this a broad category of about 10 million, we can actually take slightly more than 10 million in lost revenue. We're pretty conservative with this because we have to reallocate or rebudget every year for this lost revenue, okay? It is based on a formula, but it's based on a formula given the revenues and actual losses that we have each year. So I do want to note we will incorporate that lost revenue into the next several budgets going forward. All right? Any questions so far? Just a breakdown of what the lost revenue actually looks like, compliments of Mr. Thompson here, our comptroller. We have this year for 2020, we can immediately take $2.2 million in lost revenue, which can then be applied to general services of the city. Next year, we estimate it'll be about $2.6 million for 2021, which we can take at the end of 2021. 2022, we estimate about 2.7. 2023, which is the end of the year that we can claim lost revenue, 2.8. So approximately $10.4 million conservatively. We're still waiting on a little bit more guidance on whether our utility payments can be included in that or not, but we're estimating this conservatively about $10 million. Okay? So that takes a giant chunk of our $28 million. What do we do with the rest of it? What do we do with the lost revenue? So we wanted to put together some sample projects. This was at the actually recommendation of the finance chair, Councilmember Eklund, to let the public know what do we plan on using things for. So when we receive that first $2.2 million, once the council has approved this plan, we immediately tend to look at parks capital projects, which is allowed under the law explicitly. So things that we are looking at, the splash pad. So fully funding the splash pad. Number two, looking at a fully functional dog park at Bergman, of which we've already created the designs for, both small and large breeds. We're looking at converting potential splash pad also into a skating rink in the winter, if need be. BMX pump track, frisbee golf course, expanded walking and bike trails, as well as additional sporting facilities throughout the parks. The law and the guidance that we receive explicitly names parks as an opportunity to increase more activity to avoid COVID. So we can utilize a lot of this funding for the increase, and really one of the greatest assets we have here in the city are parks, right? We're also talking about the potential for increased parks department employees to manage that. That will come through the normal budgeting cycle. So it won't be a surprise to anyone. The other thing that we've talked about, many of you have talked about a lot, is the redesign of West 3rd Street. There's a big question of where does the money come from. That money that we are receiving as part of this federal rescue plan funding can be used for the redesign of West 3rd Street. So complete streets, rescaping, we're talking about potential bike lanes, we're talking about underground cabling, which will have ornamental lighting. We're talking about new trees and coverage down that street. So being able to repair that. We consider that an extension of the downtown core. We want to make sure that that looks nice. I know how difficult it was to remove those trees, to make the street look like it no longer has a beard or a mustache, right? It's kind of like when one shaves it off and you just see nothing there. And so we are going to be intending on utilizing some of that funding for that project. Still waiting on other designs for that. And the third major thing, again, this is just with the initial $10 million for lost revenue. There are other projects that's come into play, just a few sample projects. We're looking at fire station renovations and improvements. For those council members or members of the public that have been in our fire stations, there's a lot of deferred maintenance. Our firefighters do a great job keeping it up themselves, but there is a lot of need to help renovate some of these fire stations, really life-saving places that our firefighters stay and constantly come in and out of. So there will be some funding to make the necessary repairs to the additional stations. I only put 3 on there. It doesn't mean only 3 are getting repaired. I just threw some photos up there for you Any questions so far on lost revenue? Okay. The next category we're talking about is economic development. Of our $28 million, we've allocated 10 to lost revenue, another 10 just to economic development. The law provides a specific exception to provide for any type of business that needs to either retool due to COVID or provide or increase tourism, the ability to do business under a new, basically a new world, right? Since COVID, even though we are kind of going back to things. But anything that supports business, industry, activation of public space, tourism, and other investment. Now there is a caveat here. The law specifically states that funding directed to what's called a qualified census tract is presumed to meet the test for COVID. What does that mean? That means that if a business or an entity or a project that we are spending money on comes within this qualified census tract, anything here you see in purple, it is presumed to be a qualified expense. That covers the majority of the city of Jamestown, except for a few wards. So we will have to direct spending a little bit differently in those areas if there's a business in those wards. However, most of Jamestown is covered under this qualified census tract. All right. Now, as part of this, we are proposing that the $10 million allocation be allocated to the Jamestown Local Development Corporation, which regularly provides loans and other economic opportunities for business. The proposal would be that they would each receive a $5 million tranche each year, so two different provisions of it. I'll note that the JLDC board would have oversight over those projects. However, if you all remember, any projects that's over a certain amount, the threshold is $100,000. Typically, the city council also must approve that. So there will be kind of a double oversight that you'll see there, but a bit of a different board kind of managing that funds. Either way, any funding that the JLDC, which is considered a qualified not-for-profit agency under the law, allowed to manage these funds, they still have to follow the same rules as the city. So there will be oversight over that board to make sure that we are not missing anything from a reporting standpoint to the Treasury Department. Okay?
So non-for-profits are eligible for this money?
A city may assign its duty to manage the funds to a qualified not-for-profit. If it does so, the city must oversee that not-for-profit and how they use their funds. The city may create a grant program that is eligible to businesses or not-for-profits that could receive funding under a qualified category. So there's kind of two things going on there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically they're qualified to get money.
Yes. Well, we're talking about two, yes, they can.
Yes.
We're just talking about two different things. We're talking about one, using the agency to manage the fund,
Right.
versus an agency actually getting the funding to use in their day-to-day activities. One example, or a couple examples of some sample projects, the Chattaquin River Basin investment. This would be pooling our funding actually with the county and other not-for-profits to really focus on that Chattaquin River area for increased kayak launches. We've talked about water taxis, docking for boats, other small watercrafts, and really focusing on that river basin, the Chattaquin River area. So that's one potential use of that funding as a sample project. The other one that we've talked about is the development of a programming fund and events coordinator position. Many of you remember we had a fund for downtown programming. We've talked about creating a separate fund that may have a little bit different restrictions and have learned from the programs that we have already had, as well as hiring an events coordinator for the city that will help in year-round programming. One of the discussions we've had with a lot of folks is there's really not a lot to do in the winter, right? And so how do we find some programming that can happen year-round for families and for individuals? So part of that funding would be used to hire an events coordinator and to create a fund for additional programming here in the city. Would not be just limited to the downtown core. We've also talked about creating a receivership program. So many of you know our plight with housing, and I know that many of you probably talked about it in your housing committee meeting earlier. One of the programs that we would like to fund is a receivership program, of which some locations and cities have been trying out, whereby certain apartment complexes that need a lot of support through court action can be put under a receivership and managed by a not-for-profit. Not-for-profit would take the rents to repair the home, so it would divert the rents until the code violations in housing are up to standard, and then rents would be returned back to the owner. It would be a court pilot program that we would try, but one of the things that we are looking at and have found a lot of support and a lot of success in other cities that have tried this model. One of the potential programs. Again, all these projects would still need to be approved through the normal process. We just wanted to highlight some of those. The other category that we have explicitly talked about that was in the guidance but not in the law is housing and mental health. We all know, and I cannot stress this enough, how difficult COVID has been for everyone's mental health and for our community. So one of the allocations we are looking at is really to help those families and folks that have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic by addressing health disparities, social determinants of health, and make investments into our housing and neighborhoods. Two major programs that we're looking as part of this funding. The first one, first program is going to be a mental health rapid response. The city will work with mental health not-for-profits to create on-call and in-person social workers to respond to police and emergency service calls. We've already been in discussions with the County Mental Hygiene, Mental Health Association, and other not-for-profits in order to allow them to work directly with the police department and emergency services to respond to calls where individuals may need mental health counseling, mental support, or other types of social needs, instead of constantly just burdening our officers to continue to go to well-being calls. Okay? They're there for support and additional assistance, but we want to try to focus on some of the mental health impacts that we are seeing on many of these calls day to day. Right? The second thing that we are looking at are housing improvement program, making direct investment in housing rehabilitation programs by working with not-for-profits that are already doing some of this work. Things, for example, as a citywide painting program or other direct support for home improvements. The goal is neighborhood stabilization. I don't know how many times I could say that. I think Crystal has probably said it a million times too. It's neighborhood stabilization. We all know that there are homes that need that extra care and love that cost a lot. If we can create a program that allows for additional painting that's not just in targeted neighborhoods, that allows our residents to tap into some of these funds, to make that needed improvement, to make sure that their roof isn't going to collapse in the next year, that their code violations are taken care of. That's what we're looking at here for increased neighborhood stabilization. And utilizing the not-for-profits that are already doing this work. Okay? We're not trying to recreate the wheel here. We're trying to utilize what we already have. Almost finished. We do have a total fund or a bucket for water, sewer, and broadband. We've kept this very broad. I know it seems like three strange things together. The law explicitly calls this category water, sewer, and broadband. So that is why we put together a bucket. There is a need for critical investment, both in our water and sewer infrastructure. There has been some discussion on potential for broadband. I've kept this just as one bucket for two reasons. Number one, I know we're going to need it at some point, but number two, I don't necessarily want to tell you all as the council that we should go and spend it right away, because in discussions with our congressional representatives, there's talk that an infrastructure bill could be coming down the pipeline. Excuse my pun, right? But we don't want to, we have time to spend this. We don't necessarily want to or need to spend it all right away. because if an infrastructure bill comes in, I don't want to have us say, we spent money on this, and we therefore cannot access an infrastructure bill because we've already done the work, all right? So I put this as a broad category. We're going to hold it for a little bit. It can always be flexible, but I want to just make the council aware that there's potential for a larger infrastructure bill that's going to address a whole bunch of things, and so we're kind of just holding this in a pattern for now, all right? And then the last thing is really important. It's really a transparency and tracking. In speaking with the New York Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities, which helped really craft this bill, the biggest thing we have is how do we make this process transparent of utilizing federal funding? We're proposing really the hire of 2 additional staffers. As you notice, we have not proposed a large increase in staff. That is not necessarily the case. But in order to track this and report this, this will end up being a full-time job, okay? The requirements that we're hearing from the Treasury Department on the amount of detail and expense that might be included in each of these projects is going to be enormous. So we are proposing to have a project manager that helps us track and report on a federal level, make sure that projects are in line with the use of the funding, in conjunction with a communications coordinator that helps us streamline the city communications and together develops a public dashboard that shows the public where each project is at, how much funding has been expended, and when a project is completed. I will tell you that some type of public interface, whether that's a PDF on the website or not, is going to be required by the Treasury Department for tracking of projects. So we're trying to get ahead of that requirement and saying, let's get someone in there now that can support this. Again, this would be a time-limited position until the funds run out between 2024 and 2026, all right? Not a permanent position. Overall, general look at the allocation, how we got to the 900,000, just a general breakdown between project manager and public communications and coordination, going up to year 2026 with a 5-year total. All right. Next steps, just so you're all aware of what we're doing next, we've now presented this proposal. We've partnered with the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation to help us host listening sessions across the city to reach out to different parts of the community, including our Spanish-speaking community. Okay, we do not want to miss out on listening sessions. The intention is to present what funding we are getting, how it can be used, some sample projects, and to receive any feedback on additional projects or potential changes to this plan before we ask the City Council to vote. Okay? Those listening sessions, again, we're looking at 4 sessions across the city. We've been looking at a range of places, a couple churches, a couple schools, potentially the library, potentially a couple other, maybe some medical facilities where folks are at. We're trying to meet people where they're at. We're putting together the dates and times now. We'll make sure all of the council members get that tentative schedule. It's been taking us a little bit longer to try to schedule it. But we want to utilize that information to help improve the plan, guide us on the projects, and as individuals want to work on specific projects, try to get them engaged in some of the work that we are doing. Okay. Again, this is the framework. I will tell you that Jamestown is one of the first cities that have put together a framework. I know Erie County just released their framework for the use of the funds. People are looking at the city of Jamestown to say, how are we going to do it? How are we going to roll it out? How are we getting the public's input? And so we wanted to make sure we did it right and that we did it broad enough so that we have some flexibility in the use of the funding, but also so that we can start working on projects tomorrow for the public and for the community. Okay. Questions? Try to keep it within 10 minutes.
Are you going to have a write-in? Because some people are still skeptical about being in a public meeting and may have some comments and suggestions.
Yes, we will make sure that there is, we are putting up the website this evening. We'll put contact information if folks want to just email or write in any additional comments or other thoughts, and we'll make sure that council gets those as part of the overall package, including the listening sessions. Thank you, Councilman Reckley.
spend some money.
We've got 14 million in the bank, Grant. Stroke you a check. Only if Kim approves. All right, so again, we'll get that, the council, the information. For the members of the public, this will be up on the website late tonight, early tomorrow, for folks to view not only the presentation, but the full plan that you all received. Again, I want to thank all of my staff, as well as the finance committee members, for helping us go through this to craft it. Really looking and talking to other mayors, we are really much faster and on the ball than most cities with making this plan. And it's a really great thing to see us moving forward and spending money on things that are really going to impact the community right away. Great, thanks guys. I do have 2 items for executive session. They're related to 2 active police investigations, and that's it. Okay, no action to be taken, just an update for the council.
Anything else?
Move to go into executive session. I think you.